Senator, it's good to see you this morning. Thank you very much for joining us, and congrats yesterday on that hearing. You were terrific. What are your takeaways from the first 2 days?
Well, good morning, Maria. Great to be with you. My takeaway is that I think yesterday in particular was a very consequential day, because yesterday it became absolutely apparent that Judge Barrett will be confirmed, that she will become Justice Barrett. And I say that because the entire day, we had 12 hours of hearings, and she sat through never-ending questioning from the Senate Judiciary Committee. And the biggest thing you come away from watching that is that none of the Democrats laid a glove on her. That they were not able to find any line of attack that got any traction at all. Judge Barrett was calm, she was cool, she was collected, she knew the Constitution, and she had a temperament that was both scholarly and judicial. But even more revealing, Maria, the Democrats weren't really trying. It kind of felt like the Senate Democrats on the committee were phoning it in, that they recognize on the merits she is incredibly qualified, they don't have any substantive criticism. They considered reprising the attack that they leveled at her 3 years ago when she was nominated to the Court of Appeals, which is attacking her for her faith. She's Catholic, and they had attacked her for that 3 years ago. But I think they made a political judgment that that was too risky to do a couple of weeks before an election. And so they ended up, most of their so-called questioning period, they would give speeches attacking Donald Trump. And they'd explain what they didn't like about President Trump. They'd attack the president. And Judge Barrett mostly just sat there and smiled. I think that's a very good sign that she's going to get confirmed. I also think it's a real powerful indication that the political agenda that the Democrats have at the court, they recognize isn't popular, that their agenda on religious liberty, severely restricting religious liberty, that's not popular with voters. Their agenda of restricting free speech and giving government the power to censor speech, that's not popular with voters. Their agenda of essentially erasing the Second Amendment from the Bill of Rights, that's not popular either. So they didn't want to talk about all of those issues. Instead, they spent their time just attacking the president.
Well, there's also the issue of stacking the court, which is not popular either. If you want to quickly walk through the ramifications of this, 9 judges on the court has been the case, Senator, since 1880. I mean, you've had 9 judges on the Supreme Court since in the 1800s, correct?
Yeah. We've had 9 judges on the court for 150 years. You'll recall we've seen a Democratic president try to stack the court before, increase the number of justices from 9 to a larger number. FDR tried to do that at the height of his power. And his own party, the Democratic Party, said no. They had large majorities in both houses of Congress, and the Democrats said no, this will destroy the independence of the judiciary, this will politicize the Supreme Court, and they wouldn't let him do it. What's clear now is that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, if they win, they intend to do that. And they've repeatedly refused to answer the question to the point that it's gotten bizarre. Joe Biden a couple of days ago said the voters don't deserve to know the answer to that question. That's really bizarre. It would do enormous damage to the court, and I'll tell you, it's not just the court as an institution that would be damaged.
Let me get through a couple more topics with you while we have you here. We've got newly declassified documents, and I want to get your take on the FBI and what they tried to take down Donald Trump in 2016. The FBI was leaking stories to websites like Yahoo and Mother Jones, and then they would use those stories that they leaked as evidence to renew the warrant to spy on the Trump campaign. Those familiar with this document, and the document saying that the Bureau was reliant on public reporting to the point that Christopher Steele would speak with reporters and the FBI would then cite that reporting. I mean, this is just incredible, Senator. We keep getting more information on what they did in 2016. Will there be accountability?
I certainly hope so, and there needs to be. This is a scandal, and it stinks. If you look at what the Obama administration did, it politicized the FBI, the Department of Justice, the CIA. It used them essentially as a political oppo research team and a hit squad. They just targeted their enemies, and there's no precedent for anything like this in our country's history. Nixon, to some extent, tried to do it with the IRS. He never succeeded. Obama did succeed, and in this instance, we have the FBI. We already know they were filing misleading documents with the federal court. We already know that they were creating fraudulent documents to the federal court. I expect that lawyer to be prosecuted. We already know that they knew the material they were relying on was oppo research paid for by Hillary Clinton to attack her political opponent. They didn't tell the federal court that. They hid that from the federal court. We already know that the primary subsource for the so-called Steele report, in other words, the basis of it, was someone the FBI themselves had been investigating for being essentially a Russian agent, someone trying to recruit senior U.S. government officials to commit espionage for Russia, and yet they used that as the basis of their report. And we learned stunningly last week that John Brennan, the head of the CIA, went and personally briefed Barack Obama. We know this from his handwritten notes. This is Brennan's own notes. Briefed Obama that the Hillary Clinton campaign had come up with this scheme to attack the Trump campaign by accusing them of being in bed with the Russians. And Brennan, this is in the middle of the campaign. This is long before the election. Brennan briefs the president. Obama greenlights it. Biden greenlights it. And this latest account with the FBI, you know, it reminds me of an Escher painting. You know how in Escher painting you have things that kind of fold onto themselves over and over and over again? In this instance, the FBI is leaking to Yahoo, leaking to news outlets. The news outlets report what they say, and then the FBI says, see, there's evidence that what we're saying is right because they repeated what we told them. I mean, it was corrupt and it was political.
Just terrible.
And it's not how government's meant to operate.
If it weren't, I mean, it sounds funny, but it's not funny. If it weren't so dangerous and trampling over our rights and liberties, it would be funny. But this is such an incredible story and one that I've covered and have seen as serious as it is for years. I want to get your take on what's going on at Google, though. We know that there is a real conversation taking place in government about whether or not these social media companies will be forced to give up their protection and be able to get sued. Now we learn from a social media researcher who reports Google may be, quote, shifting its power to flip the Senate in the upcoming election. This report notes that if you type in the phrase flip the, Google's autocomplete will list the word Senate several times, Senator. Now, there's a lot of expectation about this election on the presidential side. I want to get your take on the Senate because it looks like Google is working against you and your colleagues in the Republican Party. They want to flip the Senate to the Democrat majority.
Look, big tech has gotten really bad with censorship, manipulation, open political bias. Of all the tech players, Google is by far the worst. Google is naked and brazen. The report you referenced, I'm not sure who authored it. It sounds like it may well have been Dr. Robert Epstein. He's the leading researcher in this field, and I say that because Dr. Epstein testified in a hearing that I chaired in the Senate Constitution Subcommittee, the Judiciary Committee, where he testified that in 2016 he did empirical research on Google's search results and manipulated outcomes, and he found that Google had shifted over 2.6 million votes to Hillary Clinton through manipulated search outcomes. And what's interesting about Dr. Epstein, he's a respected academic. He was the editor of Psychology Today nationally, and he's not a Republican. He is a liberal Democrat. He voted for Hillary Clinton. He publicly supported Hillary Clinton, but he's outraged that Silicon Valley billionaires would manipulate democracy to this extent. He also testified that if they continue doing what they do and double down in 2020, they could shift as many as 10 million votes to the Democrats. I think that's what Google is doing. That they are furious that they allowed Trump to win 4 years ago, and big tech is trying to silence any voice of dissent. And when it comes to the Senate, listen, I'm leading the fight to hold Google accountable. There are others who are also engaged, and big tech is a monopoly. I think they are also brazenly violating the antitrust laws. I've been urging the administration to use the antitrust laws to go after big tech for 4 years. They're finally moving to do so, but it is dangerous, and it's the biggest threat to free speech we've got in the country.
Senator, we're going to be watching your efforts on that. It is, in fact, Dr. Robert Epstein. It's exactly who it is, who is uncovering this at Google. And it sounds like we may very well see legislation here in terms of antitrust issues. We'll talk more about it with you, Senator. It's great to see you this morning, sir. Thanks very much.